Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about backup strategies across the board, internet, electricity, equipment, people, all those things. How do we actually approach that? Tomorrow, we've got education. We don't stream that, so you have to come in and check that out inside of Zoom. And then at 10 o'clock, we're learning how to make chai together. And that'll be so we'll be doing that in after hours, and it should be a lot of fun. So that'll be with Damayanti Gajar, and she's going to teach us how to make authentic chai. We're experimenting with the idea of all of us learning together with cameras and back and forth, and how that all works. And then we'll do some more experimentation with the Belfast project or Belfast method at noon. We'll be going back to Belfast and taking over the Accidental Theater. So stay tuned for that on Saturday. All right, let's jump into the questions. Leo, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready when there's some questions on the deck.
Oh, fine. Be that way.
Okay.
There we go. You should have. Do you see him now?
I do. First question is from Michael in Munich. Every time I open Zoom, I have to rearrange the two screens on my displays. Any tool you're aware of to save the window's position on a Mac? Magnet does help, but does not remember the window positions.
I think that's actually a common problem. I don't know of any way that we've been able to fix it. It kind of comes back into its own state. Does anyone know how to fix that problem? I think that's kind of the thing you do. You open it up and you move everything around to where it belongs, and that's the. I think so many of us are kind of just used to the way that's the way it works. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I tend to get bumped on the second screen. I use the second screen on a separate monitor for the active speaker. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. I think it happens when you have less than 2 people in a Zoom call. It does work consistently on webinars.
Oh, there you go. All right, next question.
The next question comes in from Douglas Carmichael. How does the Mukana platform fit into the overarching global conversation when no one is left out vision? Would localizing Mukana into as many languages as possible drive that vision forward?
I think that actually localizing, you have to get really big to localize for languages, but we are going to start experimenting with that in a couple. So we can localize it. That's just a library there. As far as how it fits into it, into the global conversation, what I've talked about in the past, a global conversation where no one's left out. The main thing is I have an opinion. That's all it is that one of the reasons that we don't have good conversations is we don't have the tools to do them. To build what I call a scalable conversation where there's a lot of people able to have that conversation and able to ask questions and vote on those questions and be part of that conversation requires tools that I believe Mukana is the beginning of. I have used a lot of tools built by a lot of people and found them to be less than what I needed. And I wouldn't say that Mukana is a perfect solution for that. I just feel like, but I have more control over this one. So we are constantly organically trying to find the answer for that with the tool of how do we build a better conversation that all of us can be part of. And so the tools that we use, and when we look at Office Hours 2.0, how it integrates tightly with graphics and queuing and process and feedback and all those other things are things that make that conversation more fluid. And I think that's when we look at, I was talking about it I think I was tweeting about it yesterday or the day before. It turned into a conversation on Twitter that my wife signed up for a class that she was excited about. She's been wanting to take this class for 20 years, but it was not something she could go to, and so she signed up online, and people were like, well, but the online experience isn't very good. Well, that's the answer is not to go back to physical events, which, basically exclude 99% of your addressable market. Almost every business, unless you're very, very vertical, a physical event excludes 99% of your addressable market minimum, and so the answer is not to go back into your hole. The answer is to figure out how to make the other one work. And so making online events work means that we build tools that tie that all together. And so Mukana is a piece of that puzzle. Isadora is another piece of that puzzle. The mix effect and all the other things that we're doing, and eventually in the cloud, those are all other pieces of that puzzle that need to get solved. And so the but finding a way to build a smooth conversation that is easy to watch, easy to listen to, easy to participate in, both as a panelist and as a viewer, and just as a just a passive person. That doesn't. I don't believe that really exists right now. And I think the closest thing to it is Mukana at the moment. And I think that there's a lot of other tools we have to add to make it better, and more scalable. But that's how it fits in for, at least for me. Next question.
Mark Baker from Truro, the southwest corner of the UK. In your opinion, does a staged real zoom background look better than a simple grey coloured background, and why?
Go ahead, Leo.
So I think that then you need a mixture of both. If you are trying to find there's definition and there's advantages of both. If you watch TV and you look at how they put backgrounds on TV, how they have their stress sets, sometimes they can be really simple and sometimes they can be extravagant. I actually find that things like where you've got with Jeffrey's background, where you've got information and you've got things that are sitting behind there, are really effective in bringing forward the person that's there. But sometimes it's also can be too busy. So it's just finding that balance.
I'll go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I actually concur with Leo. What I don't like is when they try to get a little too busy and the colors start to fight with, let's say, like the main subject, the skin tone of the person. If they take that into account and keep everything at the opposite end of the color wheel, that's at the spectrum, to aid in bringing the subject forward. So unconsciously, the viewers will focus on them instead of whatever is going on in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on your context. So if you're doing a show like this, I think a simple background is nice, but also, I mean, it could be either way. But if you're doing something that has a specific look you're going for, like Charles was saying, you probably want to stick with simple as opposed to, I don't know.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Whatever you do, please don't use virtual backgrounds. It's just a rookie error.
My eyes.
Ever looks right.
Yeah.
And if you move your hands and you've got 18 of them in front of your virtual background, it looks like Jell-O.
Yeah.
I'm saying this not only as a consumer of Zoom product, but also a post-production guy that has to get materials sent to me sometimes, where the CEO decided that he wanted to blur the background or he had some other crazy thing he wanted to do, and he's the one that looks horrible compared to everybody else. So please, no virtual backgrounds.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
I think the gray backgrounds are nice for just simple stuff. A lot of times I'll turn off this bright purple stuff when I'm going into more businessy type meetings, so it doesn't seem like it's overkill. When I was at CES last year, I did wind up shooting some backgrounds that were really nice, but I shot them all out of focus because what I was doing was I would stick another person 8 feet away, and then I would frame it up the way I wanted it, and then I would actually shoot that way as if I would have the person step out of the frame. So then I'm just capturing a nice shot that they actually turned out really cool, and they look super realistic when used with the ATEM Mini's advanced chroma keyer. So it depends on how you're keying it too. So when you get a good hardware keyer that has some advanced, you can and a decent background with the same camera, same lens, it can look great. Because yesterday I was in a meeting with our sales staff, and they were using the blurred, and now I know what you're talking about, Alex, with the cognitive load on the brain. I just couldn't even look at them because my brain was trying to process all that information of what's missing and why is that hole in their glasses filling up with their background. And it's just, it's a little much.
I just feel like it's someone. I feel like virtual backgrounds are someone showing up with cutoffs and flip flops. Like it's just like I don't care. And I just don't want to. I don't want to show that thing. But I think that I do agree with you that at this point, if you're, and again, I think that if you're just going into a meeting and you've decided that you just don't want to show your background, I guess you could put it in. But as soon as you start saying, I want to present in front of people, you need to start thinking about that process. I will say between gray and a physical background, I would 100% pick a physical background. So like the reason that mine is gray is because I have a window behind me and I haven't had time to like build up a set. And I keep on going, I'm going to build it and I just don't want to put time into it until I have it designed. And I tend to be kind of my time is very, very small. So I spend most of my free time with all of you. So I haven't been able to get to designing it. And as a result, I just put up a gray screen. So the gray screen I feel like is a good bunt for that, and it's a good solid way to handle it that kind of works. But if I was going to pick one, I would absolutely design and build something that is. Now, for me, I want it to be far enough back. I want it to be out of focus. I want it to be, like if I'm going to do it, like for me, when I build the set that I'm building in this room that I'm designing right now for the room, I'm going to move the camera as far to the wall, like it'll be right up against the far wall. And then I'm going to, be at a distance. So I'm trying to maximize the distance that I am from the background, probably 5, 6, 7 feet. And then I'm going to open that lens all the way up, and so that I can really make that a nice soft. I want you to see what's back there, because it's going to be like artifacts of media and stuff like that. But I really like the soft, feel. I think it helps. It does a couple of things. One is it helps the compression actually. Less detail behind you will make zoom actually perform better. And it also helps you pop out of the frame. So that's, so anyway, that's my 2 cents. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, I remember attending a concert and the show started a few minutes late because they had problems with the moles on stage. What are they and how are they used?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
The only thing I know is a mole Richardson, which is a kind of pinkish burgundy colored light. And so unless the light was shining in an eye or reflecting off a cymbal on a drum set, something like that, they may have had to move that slightly.
Or it just wasn't working. Yeah, but the moles, that sounds like a pretty reasonable thing that would be there. And it's something not, you don't want to delay a concert for too long, but there's oftentimes a thing of where you want to go well rather than go on time. And so if you've got something that needs to be fixed and it's going to take 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever, a lot of times they'll run a couple minutes late, even 20 minutes late in a concert, because people are hanging out doing their thing, and they'll run a little late to fix something, because if it's going to affect the overall feel, a bunch of people paid a lot of money. One of those activations is worth millions. And if you can fix it and delay everybody just a little bit, that's not going, a lot of times they'll do that in a physical event rather than limp along, after they put all that time and money into it. Next question.
Aaron Husledge in Durham, North Carolina. What are some clever ways that the panel have used Companion?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Clever being a subjective term, I'd rather use easy, or how does it make your life better? For me, with my A10 Mini Extreme, I love using mix effects, and I love even more combining it with Companion and Stream Deck, because now you have a visual reference as to exactly what you want to have happen. Punch the button, it happens. So in my case, Companion, Stream Deck, ATM Mini.
Good guy.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing with the mix effect, having those buttons. And then another one that I have done is to set up my PTZ. So let's see if I can bring up, that's the wrong camera. Let's bring up this camera. And then now I can touch those buttons, or somebody else can touch them from afar, and I can control. You can see through the web interface, I can zoom in, zoom out, focus, iris, zoom in, zoom out. So lots of fun stuff that you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I can mute my Zoom. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, I have computers in other rooms. My graphics machine doing my lower thirds. That's sitting in another room and listening for the commands. I got my 3D printer in another room, and it's running on the ATEM Mini, and so I don't have to have everything in one room. I don't have to walk over and click a mouse. It's just it's been a game changer. Stream Deck was a game changer to begin with, and then Companion came out. It was just like mind blown.
Next question.
Guy Cochran from Seattle. What is the future of sound devices?
I think it's probably better than ever. If you look at the way so for those of you listening, sound devices became part of, is it Audiotonics? Is that, I believe that, and Audiotonics is a company that owns a lot of high-end audio. So the Allen and Heath, Calrec, Digico, all of those are all owned by this one company, and Sound Devices is now part of that family. And my opinion about what that means is that now Sound Devices has a bigger scale. They can take risks, they can make investments, they can do a lot of other things. They also have access to all the technology across those companies, or they potentially do across those companies to make their products better. And then their technology can make those products better. I'd love to see their preamps in some of those mixers. So so I think that there's and then noise assist in everything. So so those are the kind of things that I think could be really, really interesting. I think that I think it's a great place for them to be, as far as giving them the kind of the security of the market that they're in is pretty competitive. It's just that there's a lot of people coming in with less expensive pieces of gear, and it means that they're definitely, in my opinion, the best at what they do in that area. But sometimes the best doesn't always win, by itself, especially when other companies are getting huge amounts of investment and other things and everything else. And I think that they picked a really good time to partner up with another company so that they have the scale to really compete head to head with everybody else. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, the other half of that is that John's retiring and Matt's going to stay with the company. So with him championing the company, that it should be able to stick as close to their ideals as possible. But you never know. It depends on how they incorporate the company, if they have to move to their location or if they can stay here in Madison or whatnot.
I think in the past there hasn't been, the big thing with Audio Tonic is that they don't really change the business model dramatically of the companies that they buy. They let them kind of keep doing what they're doing. So I don't think that things are going to change dramatically, other than just having more scale. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I agree with Alex. I am a purchaser of their Pix 240 when they were dabbling in video, and I think they stepped out of that because they recognized that they weren't as competitive in that area, and they focused on their audio devices, which they've got a solid reputation. So I agree with Alex. I think that the focus and resources is going to only make them better.
Yeah, I still have a Pix on my desk right here. It's still the best one. It's like all the tools that were built into it and everything else, the audio and the tools and the routing and the recording and so many things were. It's a classic. It's when I put up my artifacts of my favorite equipment that I'm going to put up in my little set. The Pix 240 is definitely one of the ones that's there you go, that and the 788 and there's a lot of stuff that they've made that is pretty important to what I've done. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we'll see some better outboard motorized fader control. Like right now, they recommend for the Scorpio the Icon Platform Plus, and a lot of people haven't been super happy with that. So there's things like the CL12 that are big bucks, and I know that there's other people that have things that are in that line with the Digico that line and other lines that they have SSC or something, SSL, that people are like, hey, we want this piece. And so I think the marriage of these two companies can bring about some of those external hardwares. Yeah. And I'm wondering now, it just dawned on me as you were talking, that I wonder if sound devices, they're super sharp. So I wonder if they made some moves when that fire happened in Japan with all those chips, and they might have gobbled up this is pure speculation, but I think that they gobbled up a lot of that. It made sense for them to acquire them because they probably have just tons of that stuff sitting right there in Madison.
Yeah, I think it makes a ton of sense for Audio Tonic. I mean, I think that they have that's a whole new area for Audio Tonic to go into. What sound devices? What's interesting is Audio Tonic has so many things that are so alike. The Allen and Heath and the Digico and the Cowrex and sound devices adds a whole nother feature set to what they're doing. So it makes a lot of sense for them on many levels, and also just really solid engineering. That they can use in other places. So it's really good. Next question.
Jacob Goodnight from Indianapolis. What are the panelists' opinions on using cloud production platforms as low-cost, high production value solutions to producing events? For example, StreamYard, ReStream, ShoFlo, Socialive, etc.
Go ahead, Aaron.
So I've used StreamYard and ReStream pretty extensively, and I feel like they're great. I mean, they're a great way to do that. I think that overall, they have their ups and downs, but I mean, if you're just looking for a easy way to get somebody into a production and run them, they're fine. I think if you want to start doing more intricate things, they don't have preview, they don't have a bunch of stuff that you need to make sure things are right, and you don't have a lot of control over various aspects. But if literally you just want to plop something down in front of somebody and have them go, it's perfect.
Go ahead, Leo.
So I compare this to when they brought out cameras on mobile phones, and we sat there and said, why do you need a camera on a mobile phone? I have a DSLR and it's much, much better. And the cameras on the mobile phones, because they're in the hands of millions and millions and millions of people, are actually producing and getting a better quality of product. And this is also happening with cloud production. There are probably 10 times more people using cloud production than are using things like vMix, because it's the availability and they're using it, and those tools are getting better and better. Some of them aren't great at times, some of them have got bugs, but they are, with that number of people using it and that sort of exposure, they're going to get better and deliver and start taking off of those corners. And for certain things, you may find that in a few years' time, the gap is going to narrow. Those are going to catch up to the bigger products.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, so I use ReStream a lot, as a lot of people know, and it's great. I don't use their interfaces as much because I bring in the video as it is and go from there. But I can also use that as a replicator. In fact, when I had to do office hours last week, because or earlier, whatever, when you had the power issues, I had some small issues that were easily resolved because I ended up going into ReStream, and by going into a different path, it resolved to go to YouTube, which was odd, but it was an easy fix. The other thing that I found is, they're championing on your side. I mean, that's how I got into my LinkedIn to do live stream. Before that, it was just a waiting game. And so there's a lot of good advantages to having that ReStream account or that StreamYard account. That as backup is the biggest one.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, with the acquisition of StreamYard, with a big player like Hopin, I mean, we're going to see this simplicity evolve. Like, so some stuff that's simple now, they're going to keep hearing user feedback that, hey, we need this feature, we need this feature, we need this feature. And some people are going to go like, okay, just go to vMix in the cloud. And some people are going to be like, no, please add that feature. And I think it'll evolve. So it's meet the people where they're at. And so I watch a show every Sunday for our church that's done in StreamYard. 400 people are on, and it's done really well by basic humans that can understand. They got the green room in the back and they're pumping people in, and it flows very smooth. If they were doing that with vMix, it'd be very tough to do. And I know Aaron's doing a lot of vMix in the cloud stuff right now. And I think he sees now what the complexities with like the return feeds and things like that are super handy and super nice as a panelist to be able to customize that thing. So, I mean, I'm all in. Like, I even bought the domain name vMix in the cloud. Like, I definitely think it's the future, and you should learn it for sure.
Yeah, I think that it's this gets into a lot of us sit at this level where most of what I do lives in that top, 2%, 1% of live streaming, of really complex and really things that you just couldn't do in these things. But I think on a day-to-day basis, being able to just throw things in and have them all work makes a big difference for a lot of people. So I think it just depends on where you want to have your production. If this isn't your business, like I would say, if your business is a business that you want to do events, I would use cloud. When I say cloud, I would use things like StreamYard and ReStream and so on and so forth. And for some level, you can do that for other people. If it becomes something that you want to be able to separate yourself from that crowd and do something a little bit more complex or a little bit better or whatever, I'd think about vMix in the cloud. And then for some, there's just a handful of things that I think that still work better in hardware. And so there's which is what I do a lot of, but I think all of them have a very solid place, and I agree with Leo that the vast majority of the future will be things like StreamYard and stuff like that make it easy to do, and then there'll be a smaller group but still large of production in the cloud, and then there'll be still some esoteric hardware solutions that make sense for a limited number of things, probably for the next decade. And then I think within a decade, though, we'll stop doing a lot of things, on the ground. Still some, but not many. Next question.
The Seventh Scroll in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, guys. Could you share your thoughts on the new Nanlite Pavo tubes versus the Godox TL series?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, sorry to jump in on this one. I'm not familiar as much with the new Nanlite, but I do have the other longer tube that they made with a company called Ledgo, and they're all part of the same organization. And I have a super long lead go behind me that works great. So there's a good chance that it inherited a lot of that DNA to get to it. Comparing to the Godox, I can't answer that.
Yeah, I can't compare. Yeah, I can't compare them that much. I haven't used the Godox. I'm pretty happy with the Nanlites. We've bought hundreds of Nanlites, so it's I've been pretty happy with the results. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I have a bunch of these. I have the shorter ones, longer ones. The only gripe I've had with them has been the time it specifies based on how bright you have it, of time you have left. And I have found it is wildly inaccurate at times. And that's been a problem if we're, let's say, shooting in a car or like out in the woods somewhere. We don't have any battery backups. That's an issue that we've had.
Yeah, and what it looks like is that the new ones, what kind of sets them apart here is that they have basically, what happened is that the Pavo, the new Pavo tubes are more like the 6Cs. So the 15s are like the 6Cs, that they have the same kind of construction and interface. It does look like they've possibly updated their software as well, which was desperately needed. So I think that it'll be interesting. I've never run out of battery because I've never used them on battery. I have to admit that I have them connected to USB-C all the time, and even when I'm off somewhere, I always felt like the form factor, the battery would be too small. So I always have a battery because they're just USB. I'll have like the battery pack that I would, like a big, 15,000 watt hour battery that's like wired into it that I've used in the field that lasts a long time. So I've never run out of battery because I've never actually depended on them. It's been nice, like, if I lost power, and I found that they last a couple hours, but I was always, they don't last as long as our show here. And I primarily use those Pavo tubes as a way to be on the show. So it's, in the background or whatever. So, and foreground. So yeah, it's interesting. I think the new ones look pretty interesting, but I can't compare them. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, let's say budget doesn't matter and you could build the ultimate lighting setup using ECC Phos4 fixtures for both conferencing and content creation. Would you use panels or Fresnels?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
It's really, lighting in this situation is about shadows. Fresnels are very sharp shadows, and this big, nice, soft panel will give you nice, soft lighting. And it also depends on the age of the person you're trying to light. Wrinkles tend to show up with harsh shadows, and nice, soft lighting tends to make everyone look great.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I think lights are such a subjective thing and such a need-based thing. Like, you pick the light you need for the job. The brand isn't as important at the time. If you're going to buy something, I guess it is. But if you're going to rent stuff, you're going to rent what's on the truck. And it's usually going to be from a house that you trust. So, I think I wouldn't use Fresnels in a conferencing kind of video conferencing situation unless there was some sort of dramatic thing involved in it or something.
Go ahead, Charles.
I would say it depends mostly on your creative intent. Now, if it's just talking heads, you want it to be as flattering as possible. So panels will usually give you that within a smaller square footage, because if you have a single source, you need to use a massive box just to get that nice soft look. But then again, a single source will let you shape the light in a more creative way where a panel will not. Now, that being said, the rental trucks that we have in the city, there's been a lot more investment in panels in the last 2.5 years than single source. So, but it depends on your creative intent.
Yep. Good guy.
Yeah, Fresnels basically are for throwing and focusing light. So it just depends on what you're shooting and how far away the subject is. So if I'm got a riser, 30 feet up in the air and I got to shoot down, a panel light's going to lose a significant amount of its output by the time it reaches the subject. So focusing that beam with a Fresnel is definitely where you'd want to be. But I looked up these FOSS 4s and they look really nice. I would love to use these. So yeah, I love panel lights, especially for close-up stuff within a few feet. I'd say within 10 feet, you can get a really nice look, or you just need a lot of them to light up a set. But these look amazing.
Next question.
Hazmat Kajar from Cape Town in South Africa. I bought an 11-inch iPad Pro and then realized that there is an Apple event next. Unlikely, but who thinks my purchase should have been made after the event? And the event is on Monday.
Go ahead, Aaron.
You buy what you need when you need it. Buy once, cry once. I think, I don't think there's going to be iPads at this event, but who knows?
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, iPad Pro probably won't be changed until about March, April of next year. That's what they've been doing as of recent. This is going to be MacBook Pros and probably the M1X processor. Our first looks at that. But once again, yeah, as Aaron said, you never know.
Go ahead, Michael.
There's a generous return period. So if something does come out, you can return it to your local Apple store or return it online and get the newer one. You don't have to worry.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that you'll be fine. I think there'll just be more things to buy. I have to admit, I'm hoping for the Mac Mini. So I'm kind of out of the laptop world for the most part. I mean, I have one that holds the ground when I need it, to do stuff in the field. But I just spend so little time away from my office that I don't know if I need one. I mean, I need one to have something to connect, but I don't. The laptops mean a lot less to me now than they used to. It used to be that's all I had for a decade was the laptop, and now the problem is that I'm kind of embedded in I've got 4 computers that are, my home system is, I've got a bunch of Mac Minis, and I've got 2 Mac Minis, a PC, well, actually 3 Mac Minis, a PC, my iMac, and they're all like wound up in here, and I'm rendering over here, and then doing another render over there, and then I'm doing this over here, and it makes it very difficult for me to want to leave the office because I have so much horsepower, in my home office now and I used to never have that. When we were live, I was showing up somewhere around the world, and so I was constantly just opening up my laptop wherever I was. I didn't want anything else because I didn't want any other environment. And now that I'm burrowed in, I have to admit that it's really hard to get me to even go to the grocery store. So I take a walk and I work out in my garage, and that's about as far as I like to venture out. And so it's become a different thing. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how the laptop market fares in general as a lot of people start moving more and more to working from home, because I think that we're going to be, the Mac Mini, I believe, is really the killer machine, for many, many people. So I would even be more likely to take my Mac Mini and put it in a backpack and then hook it up at the office if I had an office to go to, rather than just because it has a lot more I/O as well. It's a lot easier, and I just got a little thing that goes underneath it that gives me more I/O that just plugs into the Mac Mini, and same form factor, and it's pretty great. So anyway,
that's a whole second hour.
It is a whole second hour. I think that it's one of those things that, but I'm really curious as to the trajectory, because the Mac Mini was until the M1, the Mac Mini was just glue. It was just like, oh, we need some more scopes, or we need something else, and it wasn't. But now it's it's a real workhorse, to do stuff. So it's interesting. Next question.
Charles Klein from New York City. Does the panel have any experience with the FS S5860-20SQ? Specs say it has a 10 gig, 25 gig, and 40 gig ports.
Go ahead, Aaron.
I'm sorry. Can you read that again, Leah? No, I'm just kidding. I've used other Broadcom white label switches, which is what this is. I've used them from Broadcom and Quanta. They're great. These kinds of switches are what runs in big data centers. The operating system you choose to run on them is the question, but there are options, right? So you have to just kind of be careful with that. I'm happy to have another discussion with you about that. But these are, and the value of these is really high because it's so inexpensive. The only problem you'll get is you get to pick the software, so you have to support it.
Right.
So yeah, there you go. Right. So it's always trade-offs, right? So
yeah. Go ahead, Leo.
So one of the questions I would ask, which I haven't been able to look at the specs on this, is what's the speed of the backplane? At 40 gig per port, you're going to be pushing to, you know, how big is the backplane across the back to be able to support all the ports at maximum speed?
Yeah, and I don't know what the switching capacity is 760 gigabits per second. So it's pretty forwarding rate is 565.
Yeah, this is usually like a top of rack switch with a bunch of 10 gig servers and then a 40 gig uplink, and then you get usually you get an aggregate switch, which is like terabits a second of traffic. So.
Yeah, we've seen these in some storage appliance systems that we've seen similar. I mean, from this company, and I have to admit that once you get used to 40 gigs connectivity, it's really hard to go back. Like it's like this whole other, like it's that thing where you've been in a lot of 3-star hotels, which is what all of our switches are, and then suddenly you go to the Four Seasons and someone else is paying for it, and you're able to do all the things and everything else, and then you have to go back to, like, going back to other switches after like a 40 gig switch is like going back to the 3-star hotels, and you're like, okay, it's fine, but I really, it's okay, and so it's when we've gotten to use them. I don't have them myself, but I went back to the 3-star because I with my switches and stuff like that. But I will say that it's an incredible, like, you start moving files that are big, but the problem is that everything in the system has to be able to support that. And so what we've been, the cards and everything else that we had, these aren't on Macs. These are other other systems that had to move everything around, and it was just unbelievable. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, this is a friend that got proposed to do a few movies to grade, and we're quickly stepping up the studio and rebuilding it, and this is just going to be the drives trying to get to the system.
Yep.
So,
and that's
the main thing that we're trying to figure out.
It's been interfacing with the drives, which is what we use these for, and being able to move just massive amounts of data, back and forth has been the issue. Anyway, next question.
Douglas Carmichael, a guy who's on the panel, mentioned upgrading a 10 gigabyte switch for future-proofing. For those invested in networking audio platforms like Dante and Waves SoundGrid that depend on 1 gig, would you recommend a 1 gig Ethernet switch for audio and data, or one 10 gig and one 1 gig?
Go ahead, Aaron.
I mean, Waves and Dante don't really care what the speed is as long as it's at minimum 1 gig. So if you want to run a full 10 gig network, that's totally fine. It's not necessary. Audio is not going to eat 10 gig. But it's available.
Go ahead, Doug.
I will say from my own experience, I run 2 networks everywhere we go. I don't let network and video traffic interfere with my audio traffics, and we are a Dante audio everything. The minute that I did switch, my life became a lot easier. I will say that. I run Dante on Cisco, and then all the other network stuff is on Ubiquity. But yeah, it became I was having all kinds of network problems, but once I switched them, the problems went away.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, the device yesterday that I was recommending is the Dream Machine Pro, and it's important to know that if you are getting into these, don't do what I did, which was buy 2 of these cheap $199 8-port PoE switches, because these are not 10G ports that you uplink to. George Kennedy kindly pointed out that if you want to do 10G, he was talking to Jeff Keithley, and there's something called switch aggregation, which will then allow you and this isn't a whole lot of money, $269, and now you got 10G. So you don't have to buy it out the gate. It's just know that these options are available as your network grows. But as for having 2 separate, you could just VLAN them out and put Dante on one and NDI on the other.
So can you explain a little bit? I was doing some more research yesterday after my question. Can you explain a little bit with the Dream Machine? That gives you access to the network from anywhere, right? I mean, you can log in. That's starting to kind of build that. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, so the Dream Machine just connects you to the internet. and it also has it's like a hard drive in it, so you can record video if you want. But its main goal is to connect you to the internet. Anything plugged into it should go to the internet. And then you want another switch that is your network, right? So the reason it has 8 ports is just so that you can, if you have a small network, switches. You can do it all in one place. But yeah, usually you use the 10 gig uplink to go to another network because you're not going to have more than 10 gig internet connection usually. If you do, then you have other problems. Other things. Right? You're going to not buy Ubiquity. So,
right.
Yeah, and so you have a 10 gig uplink on that Dream Machine to another switch, which can be like a 24 port or 48 port or whatever, and
that's going to feed the rest of whatever you're doing. So
and you just plug everything into it, and then everything that needs to go to the internet will go, across that link, that 10 gig link into the internet.
And that also means that you basically can build. I can put something on. I can put VPN on my laptop or whatever, and log through that Dream Machine into my home.
Yeah,
or my office.
It has a VPN server on it.
Right. Yeah. Very good.
And it runs Linux, so you can, and it's pretty open, so you can put whatever you want on it. Actually, it doesn't really matter.
Right, but it's got its own stuff that is pretty.
It's pretty robust. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Next question.
Aaron Gencarelli of Flagstaff, Arizona. Any idea what could be causing AirPod Pros to sound muffled when connected to Zoom? Try turning off AirPods noise cancellation and using the original sound with Zoom, but it didn't sound that much better.
Leo.
So I'm reading this question because he's talked about original sound, that he's talking about the microphone. If he is talking about the microphone on the AirPods Pro, the best thing to make that sound better is to drill it out and never ever use it again.
It's usually when someone says that the AirPods sound muffled, it's usually related to the fact that they just use some other mic. Like it was just that they use another mic and then they come back to the AirPods and like, this sounds so muffled, because they are muffled. They're better than what the phone is and speakerphone, but they're not great. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
It's possible that your pads on your AirPod Pros are starting to go, and changing them out might help on that. It's also a good idea to take a Q-tip and a little bit of rubbing alcohol or alcohol and just kind of clean it out a little bit and make sure that you don't have any gunk in there that is causing any problems around the microphones or the earpiece for that matter.
I think though what I want to know is if you've used some other mic before that. I had a friend of mine. My car died, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, you can borrow my car," and it was a Nissan GTR loaded, and so I borrowed her car for about a month, and then I thought every car that I drove after that was broken. I thought there was I literally took our Honda into the shop because I was like, there's something wrong with it, because it just doesn't, because I was used to when I touch the gas, I go, I'm at speed, and so I think it might be that kind of thing. But you get a better mic and you come back to a phone mic, and it's not going to be.
It's the second Four Seasons to the Holiday Inn.
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, Duke University has used their Froshlife digital musical festival as a tool to bring freshmen together. Have you seen other examples of using media to build community in the higher education setting?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, last year we did this. We actually did a concert, and we had invited all the freshmen for orientation, basically, is what they were doing to try and, and then they would break people into their different majors and stuff. And it worked, but the students I talked to said, no, they hung out for about 5 minutes, got the information they wanted, and then took off. We on Wednesday night did our first live play. It's SpongeBob SquarePants, and you can watch it tonight on streaming if you want. And we invited the freshmen to that, and it was an exciting moment. The room of energy was just so. Live events are really great when doing that type of stuff. Live events.
Yeah, I for some reason it reminded me. I went to a boarding school, and we had this what we called back campus sing, and so we had fraternities in our high school, and they'd be on there's 4 fraternities, or 2 fraternities and 2 sororities, and we would sing these huge songs, and it was hundreds of people singing all at one time. And I will agree to Roscoe when I say that there's digital events are the future for a lot of the things in communication and everything else. They are, I think, but there's something about the being in a place doing something with a lot of people that has its own special power. So it's just, so I kind of nod the hat that I talk about digital a lot, but there is something to it. Next question.
Erin Gencarelli, Flagstaff, Arizona. How are the remote technician controllers seeing and hearing feeds during remote shows?
Go ahead, Erin.
I mean, whatever way possible. So we Zoom a lot for our productions around here. But I've seen people do WebRTC sessions. You can see, it just depends on the platform you're using. But usually it's some sort of web-based transmission because it's low latency enough that you can watch it quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we've used everything from Zoom to we also pass audio back over Unity and sometimes ClearComm's tools, so Agent IC. So those are some of the other ways. And then the more complex ones, we do things like Unity Connect, where you're sending a whole bunch of feeds back to someone who's doing the mix. So those are a couple different ways of making that happen. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Many IBM mainframes have traditionally used text art as their logon screens. Nigel mentioned they're built with careful use of the spacebar. Would a text editor be the tool you'd use?
Go ahead, Leo.
So yeah, we have to remember the time of when this was all done. So yes, you were using text editors or various different editors that were on, it's not just IBM mainframes, it's literally on anything of that sort of era. And the big thing was when you did it, you had to be in a fixed font so that so that spacing would work. And you would spend a long time doing this thing that would appear at the bottom, the top of a piece of code that maybe nobody ever saw but you.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
ASCII art is for pikers. You need to get into punch card art or AOL CD art. Those two are going to go long term.
Go ahead, Aaron.
That's so good. Yeah, it's funny. There's a program on some mainframes that will generate those for you. So you don't. If it's just words, you can do that, and then it'll dump a file out, and then you can just edit it and make it pretty or whatever.
Go ahead, John.
Aaron stole my thunder. We developed these applications. This is ASCII characters, so you can pipe in a character into an ASCII array and create the letters. No problem.
That's awesome. Yeah, I got into looking at meme or text, expressions. There's a little smiley face and everything else, but there's some really complex ones. And if you do a search for those, I keep them in my notes document. So when I want to respond to people, I can't figure out what they all are, but I just cut and paste them in. It's like there's like long strings of things that create little pictures, and it's good, clean fun. I always feel like I'm a little too old for it, but I love GIFs. If anyone works with I love GIFs and weird things in the text, I know it's anyway. Next question.
When Illuminarium mentioned filming in their virtual safari on location in Africa, they did not talk about hiring African talent. Would partnering with the ADMA for crew have made a broader impact in the areas they filmed in? And that was from Douglas Carmichael.
Yeah, and ADMA is the school that I created with the government in Rwanda. So it's the Africa Digital Media Academy. And yeah, I mean, it would make a big difference. The hard part you get into with Western production is that, and I fall into the same thing, is that I only hire local crews after I've worked with a couple of them or worked in, and that's anywhere in the world. That's whether it's in Cambodia or Paris or whatever, I'll bring as much of my own crew as I can. As much as the budget will support, I'll bring my own crew, and that is even LA and San Francisco. Generally when you're doing production, you put new people at the least important places so that you can see how they fit in. And the most important people you try to keep as much as a unified group as possible. And so I think the hard part is if you don't shoot in Africa all the time, you don't know who to go to. You don't know who to ask, for that. And so a production company that's going to go do it is going to generally, hire local fixers, local PAs, and then occasionally a camera operator. But they're not going to necessarily pick up a lot of core talent from that area. Would it make a difference? Absolutely. But even that makes a difference. When you have, getting exposure to a crew that's been doing this for 30 years is great, for folks that haven't been doing it in the same way. Exposure to an external production is a really good thing. So I think that whatever happens in there is usually including some folks from that, and that skill set is growing very fast. I mean, we went from, I don't know, it felt like there was 10 or 15 people when we got there in Rwanda that could really shoot to, we've trained 400 or 500 people now. And so I think that it's, and so that there's a lot more, like Rwanda has a pretty, solid thing. And then there's some countries in Africa that are pretty well developed. So Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, all have pretty vibrant film production markets where you can rent Aries and Reds and Blackmagic and, and you've got crews that know how to use them and that type of thing in Rwanda. The other countries are a little harder, and I have less experience with them, but it starts to, Ghana has some and everything else, but it starts to get a little harder to find people that have enough kind of understand how that kind of production works to integrate well, into the system. So, and that's something that in my other spare time, that's something that I work on a lot. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, could you see StreamYard, ReStream, and the like eventually supplanting mimoLive and the other on-premises products?
Yeah, go ahead, Leo.
So in yesterday's Australian After Hours, we were discussing Quark Express, and some of us will remember how that was top of the tree for a very long time. The reality is everything moves, everything changes. I'm a big user of Ecamm, but I don't use Ecamm in the way that I used to use it when I first got it, which was including broadcasting, because I now use StreamYard for doing that. For bringing remote guests, StreamYard and the like are much, much better at it because I'm not relying on bringing somebody in and then back out again on my limited bandwidth. So yes, I can. That doesn't mean to say I can see them replacing everything. I think there's still a place for people who want to do creativity on their own PC, their own Mac, to be using things like mimoLive.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I like the idea of modularization, so I get everything done on my PCs here and on my machines here, and then send it out to ReStream or StreamYard to go from there. A really cool feature that you can use with either of those is I could be producing content. Let's say Leo could be producing content, and then somebody could say, okay, we're going to go to Jeff's computers, and then I'm going to do my stuff, and then on StreamYard or ReStream, and then they just switch a button, and all of a sudden it switches over to the other computer. So I think there's many different ways that you can use it. It's just a question of how complex you really want to get with it.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I think it comes down to if you're going to be using this stuff for like iMag on-prem, because the trip up to the internet and back down can be too much of a delay. For example, my NDI sources are all here, and I can pop up and hit any of those, and it's super quick. And then I can do other things, like telestration on the fly. Try doing that in real time. It's a little tougher. So it just depends on what you want to do.
You go ahead, Leo.
I think one thing the way the products like ReStream and StreamYard work very, very well is to look at them as the ultimate downstream key, that you're actually able to put them as the last leg before you go out, that you can put if you want to put the holding slide that needs to be run before the show goes live, or you want to be able to put on information that's coming from the internet. So they're very, very good at being able to get stuff that's coming from social media channels and to be able to put that over the end of the program. So there's lots of reasons to be using them, even if you're using on-prem equipment.
Yeah, there's definitely still some challenges that you get into with when number one is, keeping all your signals in sync. Number two is bandwidth. Number three is being able to kind of put everything together. Like in production, you can buy desks that you're going to use for, that you're going to put stuff. I'm on a folding desk right now because I haven't decided what I want to do. So my desk is like a 6-foot folding table that I keep on clumping things onto and attaching things to and everything else. But I know that, when I get serious to buy desks, I tend to go to 80/20. Like, so all of us, and if you go into a production house, you're going to go to 80/20 really quickly. Every control room that I walk into, you just see walls covered with 80/20, and the desks are all built out of 80/20, and then they just put wood on top of them. So there's a point where you go into heavy production, or you go into something where I now need modularity. I need, as was mentioned before, I need modularity, I need scalability, I need customizable, things that I can keep on moving and I can design into. And so I think that the hardware and the mimoLives and everything else give you that 80-20 kind of approach, and that definitely is not needed for everybody. But it is when you need it, you need it. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is back with, if you wanted to build a visual paging or messaging board on a large screen at an event, could you use SPX-GC and a web application, or could Keynote be interfaced into a web page?
Go ahead, Aaron.
So there are dedicated visual paging systems because there are rules about how visual paging should work. And there are also digital signage systems that include visual paging. Those are probably more well-suited than a character generator or Keynote. Yeah. You could, in a pinch, use one of those, but, well, couldn't really use Keynote. But you could use SPX-GC in a pinch, but I would really not suggest that.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I feel bad because I can never remember his name that created the SPX-GC.
Tuomo.
But Tuomo, thank you. The thing is, Tuomo, I've talked to Tuomo about this, and he says he's already creating modules for people that ask for it. So there's always a possibility. He's got sports scores, he's got tickers that, you're never going to get in this free level of the program, but there's definitely ways to do it.
One of the ones that we used for a long time for this stuff was Quartz Composer. So we would, for messaging, it worked really, really well. So you'd have Quartz Composer running, and Quartz Composer would then look at an RSS feed or look at something external, and you just keep on posting to that, and it would just automatically go grab it and start playing it. And what was nice is it would do nice composites. Like, for instance, I think I mentioned this before, but the BBC, that temperature thing at the end of the hour that they use basically to fill, they're basically closing the hour to the top of the hour with that graphic. And that's just that's a spacer to we have an extra 23 seconds, just put the spacer up. That I don't know what it is now, but for a long time that was Quartz Composer on a Mac Mini. That was just plain, just constantly going and grabbing temperatures and putting them up. And so that was all Quartz Composer there, which is really, really a cool thing. Now, for higher end things, the kind of tools that you're looking for, things like Ventus, which we probably should bring on. We should probably get the guys from Ventus on just so you can see it. But that's the real, okay, we really want to do something on an LED wall. That and D3s and stuff like that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, the global conversation where no one is left out was a theme even in the DV garage era. Is the after hours community, including conversations with Tony Mobley, the ultimate expression of that conversation?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I was going to go with an ultimate frisbee because Alex talks about throwing the football, but I really think we're playing an ultimate frisbee game because somebody throws something out there and it floats, and then people grab it before it hits the ground, or people get underneath it and pass it along. It's really, we are an incredible, but that's where I'm going to go with the word ultimate.
Yeah, I would say, I wouldn't say it's the office hours and after hours is the ultimate, but I would say it's the next step on the path of that thing, and that my commitment to that, and I came up with that long before DB Garage. It was 10 years old when DB Garage started using it. So, or when I put it into the DB Garage mission statement, which was when it came out. So it was, so it's an older thing. I was in a weekend course where they ask you to build a mission for your life, and that was it. But that was 1992. Go ahead, Leo.
So one of the things I would say that in the time that even After Hours has been born, we've watched things like Clubhouse come and not quite go, but it wavers on and off. I think these things are always fluid. What is the ultimate of anything? What is the global conversation? Where are we going? These things are always open. This is a great, I would say this is a great Sunday discussion of what we talk about on Sundays. And it's a good example. We definitely hit some really big highs of things that haven't been there before. I think we've had a few bumps, but I think it's a really great experience.
Yeah, I think that I do think that we've built a group of a society or a culture or something here that I've never seen before. That just from everyone here, that there's a connection that I think is really interesting. I have a lot of, of course, we're a couple hundred people every day rather than a couple thousand or hundreds of thousands or whatever that are all in their own little nooks doing their thing. And when we get to that, when we have, any given time, there's 100,000 people in 100 different meetings or whatever, then we know that we're getting closer to that goal. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, could creating concepts and the content bridge disciplines connecting artists with scientists, for example, help drive the global conversation vision of after hours forward?
Or office hours, I think there. Go ahead, Charles.
I think that is the best way to go in at, and also like the only way to go, because you need the people that have the vision to think ahead, but you also need the people to build the bridge.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, we have to find a way to apply it.
Yeah, again, in the way that we have it here, we have some people that are conceiving of ideas, but then you quickly can find the people that will bring the missing pieces that you might not have the time or knowledge to actually conceive of.
Right.
And they will patch together things that you need. And very quickly, you've seen what's happened here. There's shows that are just going off the left and right, just from the knowledge base that has come together here. So that, I think, is the best way. Just as a society, there's a great example of what can be achieved very quickly, but can be shared with the global audience.
Aaron?
I think we have a really deep mutual respect for one another. And I think that we have, we're a multidisciplinary bunch. You know, we have space doctors in Vienna, and we have Charles, who's this amazing colorist, and we have all these other things. And all of that makes us who we are as a community. And I think we all need to honor those things. And I think that makes us who we are as a community. So.
And I think that, you know, I look at media as a accelerator of everything else. So I don't look at it as a thing on its own, but as it accelerates tourism, it accelerates businesses, it accelerates ideas, it accelerates learning, it's an accelerator, you know, and so you apply it to whatever is out there. And I oftentimes think about how could you use media to accelerate this problem or to make it better, but I don't think of it as something in itself as much as it is a thing that you add to other things to make them to bring something else out. So so I completely agree. Next question. Okay, and we're now changing subjects. We're going to move to backups for the backups. This was one that was requested. We talk about it. It comes up over and over and over again of like, how do we handle this kind of backup? And there's all kinds of backups. There's redundancy for people. There's redundancy for electricity. There's power. There's redundancy for connections. And so today I thought it would be good for us to talk about what does that actually mean and how do we actually approach it? Because you're only as good as your redundancy in so many parts of life. So let's go ahead and jump into the questions. We got so many. I was going to say we're going to talk about it for a little bit, but we've got so many questions. We better just jump right into them. Let's go ahead and so if you see the questions there, make sure to vote those questions up and down as you'd like to get into them, as you'd like us to discuss them, because we'll probably wax on a little bit on them. So it's worth putting those votes in. All right, next, first question.
So the first question is from Dennis Champion Walker. From Southend-on-Sea in the UK. OBS has a plugin to allow streaming to 2 encoders from one OBS instance. Other than providing AB streams as a streaming platform is there any value in doing this as it doesn't provide redundancy?
Go ahead, Leo.
So my understanding in the use of this plugin was always to send to 2 different, completely different environments, so sending to YouTube and Facebook at the same time, and not to the dual of there. While you can use it for that, the reliability of the endpoints on are very good. The issue is more likely to be your single point of break, which is your own internet connection.
Go ahead, John.
So OBS is unstable by itself, and adding a plugin to the mix to encode to 2 different streams, you're asking for trouble.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So you could do a stream, and you could set something up if you understand the program to actually stream to another computer inside of your house, and then of course, or business, and then of course out to like a YouTube or a Facebook or so that would then allow it to go to another machine that would do some other type of processing. But once again, if you're getting that complex, OBS is probably not going to be the platform that you want to be on.
And I think that the overall, what it really touches on that I think everyone's kind of mentioned here is that you want to think about adding redundancy, but you have to think about redundancy versus stability. So as you add, whether in many different places, as you start to add redundancy, does that actually increase? Because in the end, what you're trying to do is reduce the chances of a failure. And are you increasing the chances of the failure by adding redundancy to it? That's the thing you have to kind of keep in mind as you go down that path of, am I making it actually more complicated and more likely to fail because I'm doing these extra things? Now, there is a reason to go, even if from one encoder to go to both ingest points, is because the ingest point, and we have had the ingest points fail on YouTube. Like an ingest point stops working for a minute, and remember that it's all the way through the distribution pipeline inside of YouTube, and so anywhere in that stream, it can fail. The other thing to know about that specifically is a lot of times people will put their best foot forward on the primary, and then they'll use a live view or something else on the backup. The thing to know is that if there's any problem with the player jumps over to the backup. At any given time, your 30 to 50% of your viewers or more could be looking at the backup. And it's not like everybody's looking at the primary and then they all switch to the backup. It means the player had an issue, so the player goes to the backup. So you have to always remember that there is it's not. It took me a long time to get my head around this, talking to folks that think about this stuff, is that the player is making that decision. It has that available to it, and it says, this isn't working, I'm going to go to the other one. And that can be, literally the person watching the stream could have an internet problem and it'll jump to the backup, because it's just saying, I'm not getting what I need, I'm going to go to the other thing. And so the thing is that edge means that you just have to always think about that, is that both of them have to be high quality, because you don't know which one is being watched. Next question. Are you there, Leo? Or am I?
Sorry. Juan C. Robeles in Mexico. Of course, we'd like to hear some of the horror stories.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, this is a hard one. I had a young mom who was brought in to work on an accreditation project, about a 150-page document. She worked on it for months and months and months, and then one day got the sad Mac. And I just never assumed that somebody knows that they're supposed to back up or knows how to do backup. And that was the hardest thing for me. And so make sure, just be kind to people. Ask them, are you backing that? Especially like family photos, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We often say that nothing exists until it exists in three places. So it's two physical locations and once in the cloud for anything that matters. I don't keep everything like that, but when we go, this is something I care about, it ends up in three places and two physical places. When I say two physical places, not two physical places in your house, two different places in there. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, well, I own a TriCaster.
One.
I will say.
I thought that's all you were going to say. Is like, here's a horror story.
That is the horror story. Yeah. But no, it has taught me that backups are extremely, extremely important. And I think that's one of the things that differentiates hobbyists versus professionals, is that professionals think of all the reasons that something could go wrong. And then we then have a plan if that does go wrong. And I this is a great topic that needs to be hit on, that as you're learning, take the experience from this group and others that, we have lived these pains, and I have buried my head with the client behind me, and while the wife is crying next to me, and you don't want to ever have those experiences in doing productions, because sometimes it's you have one shot at it. Like, you can't go back in time and I should have thought of this, I should have thought of this. The pre-production and what you come up with before the show is so much more important, where during the show you're just hitting next, and it should run as smooth as you can. But as we know, productions don't run smooth as we can. Something always happens, and I consider myself more of a troubleshooter than a video professional, because I troubleshoot every show, and so but yeah, I own a TriCaster.
Good, John.
So I like to collect these things. If you have some, send them to me. My favorite one of late is the Nathan's hot dog eating contest on July 4th. They had a major outage. You see this blue screen? That was 30 seconds of airtime on ESPN. It was like an encoding or a bandwidth issue. And this happened several times within the live broadcast. They had to cut out, go to video, recorded video, and then come back. It was a disaster.
Aaron?
So I think about this sort of stuff as everything breaks all the time. And you have to balance the needs of the production or whatever it is you're doing with the value that a backup will have in any given situation. So, AKA they're not paying me enough or, I don't have the budget, isn't probably a nicer way to put that. In my own history, I've lost data lots of times because I thought I had a backup and I didn't. Backups are only as good as the way you restore from them. Yeah. I've lost hundreds of thousands of photos and other things because, it's on Google Drive or it's on this, but there's nothing stopping you from accidentally deleting your Google Drive, right? And it's not really a horror story, but it's more a philosophy that I have. It's just don't trust yourself and don't trust other people. It's your data and it's important. And if it's not important, that's fine. Just whatever. But that's.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
I think this is where all that wisdom of people that have done a lot of shows comes in handy because we've been burned. It's just eating the arrows in the back. Yeah, I'd love to have like some medals or something, or some kind of
purple heart.
Show. Like,
we need streaming. We need a digital purple heart. I have a couple. I'd have a whole I'd have like a whole badge thing full of purple hearts. took one. I took
Your
one for the
jacket
team.
would be too heavy.
I know. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, were you gonna give us a horror story?
Yeah,
Guy?
so we did have one where we had not enough power. There was about 11,000 viewers on this show called Dancember, and a charity event that we do every year. And somebody plugged in a GH5 battery charger into a big long power strip that had a Mac Pro on it that was doing the encode, and it took out the whole stream. Just one little GH5 battery charger, and it took us about a minute or so to recover. And so we learned not to just have one encoder. So the next year we put in a Teradek and an AJA hardware, AJA, I don't remember which, Helio, and that worked well. But even that went to the backup. So the second year we had, 2 encoders and still had another failure, and it went over to RTMPB on YouTube. So you learn. I mean, it's just, again, I wish everybody the best, but learn from us and try to have backups of the backups.
I think the thing that a lot of times those failures though, they kind of change your, like really bad failure, the horror stories change your DNA, like they just, the way of how you approach projects. I mean, I will admit I hadn't had a lot of experience with TriCasters. I mean, I had a little bit, but they were software and they'd been a little, like Leo had one. So I knew how to run one because I used to run my own shows when Leo was in the old brick house, the original house or whatever. I'd run my own shows on his TriCaster, and I found them to be a little wonky. But we had to do one in the White House, and so we were in the Roosevelt room, and as Obama was walking in, the TriCaster crashed, like just thumped out, like and so I'm looking at our audio engineer just going like this, just go really slowly, and so he's like putting on the mic really slowly and getting it all just right, and you could tell Obama was looking at him like, what is going on here? Like he does this all the time. Like he was just like, this guy is spending way too much time on this, and he keeps on looking over at me like this, and I just keep on going like this, like, and then I look over the TriCast operator, who was very talented, which we were very fortunate about, and I'll talk about that in a second. And he gives me a thumbs up, and I just go, and then he's like, okay, we're done, and he stands up and goes and sits down, and anyway, so it was one of those things. Again, I had talked all week about not wanting to use the TriCaster. So when it happened, I looked over at my client. And I was just like that's what I was talking about, and then after that, it was like, we will never put a TriCaster into the pipeline. Like it was just like but that becomes the thing. The biggest horror story, we used to call this in our company, we used to call it the event that will not be named. So it was, and it happened right after that event. We had an event in New Orleans so it was the first event probably in 2 or 3 years that I didn't use I had this internet company, Straight Up Technologies, that we would always just bring in, and they were the hammer. Like, we just bring them in to handle the internet, and we paid them a lot of money, and they do what they interface with a hotel, or they interface with whatever, and then we have internet, and I don't have to think about it, and they just hand it to me. And in this was a very high profile, VIPs, actors, A-level actors, everything else is all there. And the budget got tweaked a little bit, and that was just the thing that I cut out. Like, I can do this. I can talk to the hotel. This is a hotel. I'm not bringing internet in from somewhere else. I'm just asking the hotel for it. And so anyway, we did that, and we talked to the hotel, and we worked out what they were going to do. They're going to give us a code that we put into our we would sign in, we put a code, and we would be guaranteed for each room. This is all a bunch of hangouts. Each room would get 10 megs, based on that code, right? And we got there, we tested it all day. 10 megs, 10 megs, 10 megs, 10 megs, 10 megs. This is a big gala. So there's all these actors coming, and they're all staying in that hotel. And this is like lots of actors. It was a big fundraiser for Haiti. So you can imagine, Sean Penn is involved, and it's all his friends, and this is just one little thing to them. Like, there's not, but it was a lot of high level folks. Anyway, so so I guess somebody had a good idea of making all these VIPs really comfortable. And so they started giving that code out to everyone. So what happens is everything's perfect until 20 minutes before the show. And then suddenly we see it's 8 megs. And then 15 minutes before the show, it's 5 megs. And you're like, there's nowhere to go. Like, this is like one of those things, like, you've gone off you're seeing the cliff coming. There's no way to stop. There's no way. And you can just see what was, and we didn't know what was happening, but we knew that something was happening to our bandwidth as we got closer to the top of the hour. By the time we got to the top of the hour, we were like at 0.5 megasecond, per connection. And and it was just, it's just debris in the atmosphere. The whole show, and it's like really high level folks that don't understand why this is not working, and are upset, and so anyway, that became the event that will not be named. And our result is that we became, and we still are, but we really became brutal about internet. Like, it was just like, we would tell clients, they would get like 10 emails about how bad this is going to be if we don't have a second backup. It's like, this is all the things that can go wrong, and they get these long lists of stuff, and they'd find like almost all of them. Like, 2 days later, I was in London, so I was in New Orleans, and then 2 days later, I was in London, and I was at King's Cross. I think there's a theater there, and we were doing the tour with this time I did have somebody there, so I had F1 is the company that we used and we were talking to the folks at the theater, and it's a big building. I think the Guardian, no, is it the Guardian? Someone is in there, like one of the magazine things is in the building.
It's the Guardian, yeah.
Yeah, and anyway, so we go in, and I'm just, I just come out of the event that will not be named. And so I said, I immediately asked the people at the theater, I said, we got down to where the WAN came into the building. And I said, is it okay if we put a QoS box here? We're just going to tap off what we need, and then we'll give you back the building back what it has, and that way you might see some degradation, but it'll be fine. And we walk away, and the F1 guy asked me, he goes, so when you say degradation, what does that mean? Like to you? And I said, oh, just shut the building down. I said, it's not. I don't get paid to do their internet. Like, I was like, I'm going to get this. I'm going to do this show. I said, by the time they figure out what happened, we'll be done with the show. And literally, I just shut the whole building down. Like, when it came in, Richard Branson walked on stage, and the whole building just went, doo. And our show streamed fine, but the Wi-Fi it caused other problems for us. Our Wi-Fi didn't work. Like, nothing worked outside of our internet, and so we created some of our own problems with that. But but from then on, it was always like all we cared about was our internet. Like, as a streaming company. And you do have to, one thing that we learned over time related to that, I know I'm talking a little too long, but I'll come in. But the one thing that we learned over time is that you're going to go under the bus if it doesn't work, and it won't matter what happened, and so you can try to explain this stuff away, but you really have to fight for what you need to make sure that the event works well, and at least have the conversations. What you don't want to do is not have the conversations about the need for redundancy, the need for backups, the need for enough time to load in, the need for the right crew, the need, you want to at least have those conversations, because you want clients, when it doesn't work, to go, oh, right, we had that conversation. Like, you told us that it wouldn't work if we didn't do it this way. And so a lot of it is, that's what we learned from this whole process. And then we became maniacal. The last thing I'll say about this is that we were streaming. We streamed both. In 2016, we were the stream team for both the RNC and the DNC. So for our clients, so we managed the proceedings. And so in the DNC, it cost $20,000 to get a Vivix line out of the arena, in Philadelphia. $20,000. They were just, they had the contract. You can't do anything else. You have to pay, and almost nobody did it. And I paid for the $20,000. I paid the $20,000 for the Vivix, and there was this massive rainstorm. CNN went out, MSNBC went out. All these folks went out because of the massive rainstorm, and the stream on YouTube was perfect. In fact, and so there's been a couple of those that we've done because we spent the extra money, because we pushed all that forward. And so those are the things, and you look really good when that happens, especially when all the lights go out and you lose power in a building and all the lights go out and your stuff is all still running because you have UPSs. Clients remember that. So, and so that's the last thing I'll say about that. Anyway, go ahead, Aaron.
How do you, if a client isn't convinced that the backup needs to exist?
So we do it a little differently now with 090. 090 has a slightly different. With Pixel Core, I never gave line item budgets. I would give long descriptions of what we were going to do. We're going to have this many cameras. We're going to have this much, but then it would just be a number, be one number at the bottom. And what that meant was I get to decide how this is going to turn out. And so I would put in all the things that I thought that were necessary. I'd bring extra cameras and people and things and whatever, as long as I make it work inside the budget that we agreed on. And we had a lot of clients that hated that. But they would ask me, like, why can't you give me a line item budget? I'm like, when you go to a restaurant, do you ask for how much did the wheat cost and how much are you paying the cook and how much are you don't want to ask any of those things. You just want to know how much the spaghetti is. And I was like, in this case, the spaghetti is $142,000. It's really good. It's like there's a menu and then this is how much this costs to do it. Now in 090, again, I try to do that when I can. A lot of clients still want to see these line items and stuff like that, even though it doesn't really matter. Line items are horrible, destroy events because you don't get the redundancy that you need, and it's a horrible idea. It's just that it's hard in the culture that, with some clients, they really want those. They just don't realize how much damage they're doing to their own event to do that. And the reason that we were able to, in Pixel Core for a long time, able to do incredible events and add all kinds of value is that we were constantly pushing. If we saved money on hotel rooms, we put it into the lenses. It wasn't like we were trying to get more money. We were trying to build better events. Now, not everybody does that. That's why they want line items, right? but we would, just keep funneling quality into the event. We would save where we could, and then just push how far we could make that go. And so that allowed us to do that. Next question.
David Brady of New York. Drobo 5N, populated with 3 6 terabyte disks and 2 3 terabyte disks. Just lost a 6 terabyte drive. Should I continue to populate and increase size, or should I look for a better NAS and plan for a long and arduous data transfer? Any suggestions on NAS?
Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, so when Drobo first came out, we had a couple in the office because they just made it easy. You didn't have to be IT. It's a plug and play thing. And they also said that you could put different sized disks into it. Now, we found that sometimes can be troublesome. So the first thing I would do is actually make all 5 disks just the same size. So go to 6 terabyte. They don't like being moved that much. So as long as you're not moving that thing too much, then you should be okay. I don't know if you're using RAID 5 or RAID 6. You can do those on the Drobos. If you're thinking that you're going to be expanding, you might just have to bite the bullet and get something bigger. I have a bunch of the LWC RAIDs here. I have about 105 terabytes spread between 3 RAIDs. If you're going to go beyond that, what I'm thinking about doing right now is something like this that we're building at a different studio. It's just a QNAP system, and this is going to be replicated at a different location, and both of the units are going to copy each other. And this is just like for bigger productions and stuff like that. I see my video just completely went out of sync. So as far as the Drobo, they're great. They're simple. They just plug and play. But if you're planning on expanding, think of something a bit more robust.
Good, Doug.
I would step away from Drobo at all costs. That's just me.
What do you use again?
What's that?
What do you use again?
Well, I have 6 different brands of NASs, but the one that I love the best is 45 drives. I owned 3 8-bay Drobos at one time. And I lost 2.5 years worth of data of our video projects, and I will never ever use a Drobo again. But your data sometimes is your life, and what you put on a device, if that device fails, like you're done. But and the whole reason for this second hour is backups, so you do need a backup to your backup, and so that we have learned the hard way. But Drobo as a company, when I was working through the problem, had terrible support for me, and they didn't help at all during the process. And even during the process, I was losing data on a daily, hourly basis. And had they told me to like even unplug 2 of them, I could have saved more of my data. But I just had a bad experience with Drobo, but that's just me.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I think don't mistake a RAID for a backup is really important. A RAID is just a disk. It's 6 disks aggregated into 1, or 5 in this case, but it's still a disk. And if you want to keep your data, you have to copy that data somewhere, at least 2 places, ideally, right? In this case, if you've lost a drive, you need to replace that drive right away. And I would just replace it with another 6 terabyte drive. And then I would go to look to replace it with something a little more flexible, probably. And I'm happy to talk about that stuff with you. But I think, and it's not that Drobos are bad, but they have some quirks, and they're sometimes a little bit iffy with regard to recovery. So,
Jeffrey?
So yeah, I've had a Drobo for many years. Got to keep in mind, to Doug's point, that Drobo was actually bought by StoreCentric back in 2018, I believe it was. And so they've kind of taken it into a new direction. However, on that same aspect, there have been a lot of people that have been complaining that Drobo hasn't been doing too much in the back orders on the current models. So the 5N, of course, the 5N's been around forever. So I don't know if you have an older model or a newer model of the 5N, but if you decide to continue with that, because you will hit a wall with your storage because it's regular spinning media there and not flash storage. And once the only other thing I would say is if you're going to continue with that and that Drobo dies, you might want to think about having a backup of a Drobo just so you can get to your data so you can pull it off and put it somewhere else.
Go ahead, Leo.
So I think that one of the things that people don't, or people do realize is that every single piece of hardware has a lifespan. And I've lost a Drobo as well. I think everybody is probably on this panel seems to have lost a Drobo. But it's more to do with the fact that you can't just sit there and say, I've got this device and it's running for 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 years and it's going to be good. They eventually die. The disks die first, but the actual device itself will die. So I think I would sit here and look at it and say this maybe is a time to be looking at putting, as somebody else has said, put a disk in, but actually saying it's time for me to invest in a separate device and move forward as I would do with anything else.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I would definitely replace the drive, but what kind of drive? I would get the enterprise level drives that are rated for 24/7 and warranted for 5 years, and just the heavy duty drive I go with the Western Digital Helio Seal. So it's filled with helium, and the drives spin a little bit faster. It's a little more economical, doesn't get so hot, and really nice drives. I'm using a Synology NAS. I've been in the Synology family for a long time and haven't had any issues. And of course, if you're going to back up to Glacier or someplace online.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all had. I mean, I've had every raid at some point fail, and it only in the first couple was it really bad, and I thought it was horrible because I lost gigabytes of memory. Like it was. This is 15 years ago, and lost some stuff that was important, personal stuff that was important. And so and I actually got some of it recovered by Drive Savers is like 5 minutes from my house. so they helped me get some of that stuff back. But I think that experience had me just constantly become this, like, I just put files everywhere. So I just have lots of, I have them in the cloud, I have them and so I've had failures, but I guess they haven't been something that are traumatic only because I had them somewhere else. I had them usually in a couple places. Like my personal photo collection is copied to a lot of places, and so it would take a lot to take it down. So that's and it's also why I like photos, just because I throw everything goes into it so that it's all somewhere in the cloud too. Next question.
Luca Pascal Gianni from Montreal in Canada. Good morning. Can you please elaborate on redundancy strategies for internet connections during live streamings or live online events? Thank you.
Go ahead, Aaron.
So I've had a horror story during a production that Alex knows about where my internet died and my backup internet wasn't working for whatever reason. It's really important, even if you're not streaming directly from your house, if you're working on a production. I always try to have at least 2 hardwired internet connections, even if one is just cable modem or something and one is fiber. That's what I have in my house. It is totally worth it, the extra, $40, $50 a month to do that. And if I'm out somewhere, I do the same. There is no substitute for hardwired internet. Everything else is okay, right? So you get a live view and you get 3 SIM cards and whatever, and you do that and it works fine, but it's not great. And yeah.
Good guy.
Yeah, I was on that same event when we had some people from Google come in, some hired guns, mercenaries, so to speak, in the live streaming world, and they had their choice of everything, and they brought in a Clearcaster, and I thought that was going to be the encoder, but then they come waltzing in with a backpack like this, and I was kind of curious. And when you dig into the data sheet, this one's the LU800. You could see that it not only has the 8 5G modems, but you also have the 2 Ethernet and 2 Wi-Fi interfaces. So we had 2 Ethernet connections and we had a hotspot, and they had I think they only had 5 of the 4G modems at the time on this production, but it was amazing that they had this choice, and that's what they went with. And so this goes up to the cloud to their LRT service and then rebonds all the best of. You get a graph on the far end of what each signal's doing, and then you can spit that back over to YouTube or wherever. But I was impressed that this is what they wound up using was a live view. And so, I mean, in my hand, I have this is the $999 version, which is kind of the baby, but I've got 1 Ethernet and then 2 USB and Wi-Fi, so I can get 4 connections out of this. Goes up to the cloud for $350, repackages everything together, best of, and then pushes it over to YouTube. So nice backup.
Yeah, for us, we start right where our encoders are, depending on what those look like. And so we don't always get it, but we request that the Ethernet that leaves our location at a venue goes in 2 different directions. We literally want to see the Ethernet go out and go that way. And we want it to go, we had actually a forklift run over one during a show one time, and we just lost the internet on one side. No one noticed because so what we do is, now ours is a little different, and we typically have on site 2 elementals, and each one of those elementals is sitting on 2 different internet connections, and those elementals are what we call output locked. So they fire it's kind of like Genlock for encoders, and so they're output locked to each other. One's following the other one, so they're creating the frames at the same time. And the reason that output locking is important is that means that if you're, let's say, streaming to YouTube, when you drop, you won't see a jump. Like it literally just goes to the next frame when the encoders are locked, especially if you're going to Akamai or something else like that. That happens. And so we go both two different directions. We went two different service providers. We went two different ways out. We want everything to be as far down redundant as we can if we're doing internet. Now that doesn't always happen. So other ways that we break this up, and we take a pace approach, which is it's a SEAL team, a term, but it's primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. If left to our own devices on a large event, we will have our primary will be fiber, and video fiber, not kind of fiber, but video fiber. Our alternate will be either satellite or terrestrial internet. Our contingency will typically be a live view, for that process. And emergency is, a MiFi, like we have, all of us for a long time have had these little MiFis, and I've streamed a show with a MiFi, and it worked. It wasn't perfect, a couple of drop frames here and there, but it was better than no show, And so those are the ones that we start to think about there. Satellite, when we don't have access to fiber, then satellite moves up into that group. Sometimes and we've literally brought 2 satellite trucks, to do that, and you think that that's not important, but like, for instance, we did this one called The Holiday Hole, which was a YouTube thing for Cards Against Humanity. And the satellite truck, we were running 48 hours. He didn't fuel the generator. So the satellite truck just suddenly dropped signal. Now, the reason that no one noticed on the far end is because we had a live view. The live view we use the live views typically with the extender. The extender adds another 8 modems to it. So it's a little, looks like a little dish. And you plug it into one of the Ethernet cables of the live view, and then you have more modems. And so that extender, anyway, so that went back to our master control in Washington, D.C. that I had at the time. And so when our operator saw the satellite go down, he immediately just hit the button and went over to the live view. So you did see a hiccup, but you didn't see, it just looked like an internet glitch for a second, to the viewer. So one of the great ways of doing redundancy, if you're not doing it straight in, and does give you more control, is to back up that internet to a location. And that can be in the cloud, that could be at AWS. So we've done it with vMix, where vMix is sitting there in the cloud, looking at 2 different internet streams coming into it, and you can just switch between them, if needed, and that's our backup. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can make that work. But those are some of the options that you can look at. Next question
is
Yep, go ahead.
1C Robles Mexico. What was the situation that pushed you to implement backup plans?
Go ahead, Charles.
So I was lucky when I first got into post-production. I was at a facility that did sight and sound. And for all the junior people, every so often they would do this where the main person would have them do a real client session, have the regular client come in and have them just sit and have the junior people that just came in do the entire session. And he would go to the machine room, watch them on the security camera, and he would unplug the main feed from the main drives and see what they did. Now they knew that just to switch the media from that to the backup, relink everything, and it all kept going. But they realized how valuable just having those things were. Now, once I experienced that, at the time it was expensive to actually have RAIDs. You needed like an IT team, and it wasn't more Mac based, but I quickly got some extra drives at home. And I would just manually connect everything. And from that point on, I expanded that theory that when something, not if, but when it's going to go wrong, you need to have a backup.
Yeah.
That was the first thing that I learned.
Jeffrey?
There should be no situation where you realize that you need a backup. You should have that planned already in any type of business plan. If you're doing any type of streaming, any type of audio or anything like that, that's one of the first thing I did when I sat down and said, okay, I'm going to be doing live streams from remote, because when you're getting on a plane and you're going somewhere else, and you don't know where the electronic stores are. You don't know where anything is, so you can go there and get things fixed really quick. It makes it really tough. I've had people call, and I've, as you said, Alex, you never want to ask somebody for something, but you're always willing to give something to somebody to help them along on their quest for perfection.
Aaron?
Backup plan is only as good as practice. Always practice. Make it automatic. Be like a pilot. Be like a pilot of a plane. You always know what you're going to do when it happens.
And I think that,
and then it will just be automatic.
I think that for many people, the people who take backup seriously are it comes from failure. Like it's just, like you think about, you can get taught backup plans. You can think about the backup plans. You can do the backup plans. But when the people who really take them seriously are someone who's been in the situation. And I wouldn't say there's nothing worse, but there's very few things in our job that are worse than being in a live event in front of hundreds or thousands that are streaming out to hundreds of thousands of people and watching an event just unwrap. Like it's like having your arm cut off. Like it's just like you can't, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's no way out of it. There's no, like, you just kind of just eat the pavement. And when you come out of that, you just go, I'm never going to have that happen again. And then you're trying to figure out, we had an event, in London, where our encoders didn't work, and I had to go to a backup. The video that we rented from the company came in pieces and weird things and didn't work and everything else. And this was at the Excel Center or whatever. And we survived it, but it was so painful that I was like, that's never happening again. And that was one of those moments where I started buying all my own equipment, and I started changing how I dealt with encoders, and I started doing, all that stuff kind of sprung out of that, and we became a different company. But I don't know very many people that do that until they failed. Until they feel the pain of failure, they don't take it seriously. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, the one that did a budget check on me was we had about 34 people working, and the internet went out, and we had a backup, but it wasn't just the backup that went out; it was the switch that went out. So this is our machine room, and in there we now have full-on switches that are just there idle, just to swap everything over to. So when a piece of hardware goes out, we actually have duplicate of every Ubiquiti piece that we can just hard swap out, and it's like $300 per, or even more, on the 24 port and the 48 port. But the lesson learned is when you have 30 plus people sitting there idle, it costs way more than that hardware. So we physically bought duplicate of everything.
Yeah, a lot of times we talk about burning the train. There was down Pennsylvania Railroad, there was, Andrew Carnegie was an assistant to the president or something of the railroad, and the president was gone, and Andrew Carnegie had been thinking about something for a long time, which is that it was probably cheaper just to get the train off the track because of how much they'd lose going through and so he would the telegraph came in and said, there's a standard telegram, there's a train that's down, it's in this track or whatever, and Andrew Carnegie just sent back, burn the train. And they were like, we think we misunderstood what you just said, because it looked a lot like it was translated as burn the train. He said, burn the train, just push it off the track, and clear the line. And anyway, that became standard practice at Pennsylvania Railroad, was to burn the trains. If they died, they just burn them and push them off the tracks, because they cost a lot less to get rid of the train. And when we talk about it in production, you have to be ready. You have to always know how much everything costs and know what the risks are, and be willing to do whatever it needs to be done to get it working. So a lot of times when we've flown lenses in, we've moved people, we've done all this. Like we got the wrong mics got packed for Davos. So we got there and we had 5-pin. I had TA5s for TA4s, and I was just like, and we tried to figure it out. I put a person on a plane in that night. We put someone on a plane. They were there in the morning and we tried to figure out something else for them to do, but we just flew them in with TA4s. That's and so that is the and so you have to know when. I think what really gets people is they hang on to the way that they were doing it, or their plan too long. The other side of that is to not hang on long enough. What?
Hope is a disease. It's not a strategy.
Well, yeah, hope is not a strategy. We say that a lot. Like, when people say, well, we hope it works. And immediately, anyone in my company, if you say, we hope anything, you will immediately get a response that says hope is not a strategy. And it's like a lower brain, like, do not ever say that word around me. I don't want to hear hope. We often say that we are hopeless. We have no hope. We only have logistics. All right. Next question.
Juan C. Robales from Mexico. What was this? How do you decide which systems require a backup?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I mean, ask somebody who's wiser or with a lot more experience. But from my business school training, I'll give you three things. The PERT diagram, which stands for Program Evaluation and Review Techniques, identifies bottlenecks or single points of failure. Cost-benefit analysis is always important. And then the last one is SWOT, which stands for Strengths, Weaknesses, Opportunities, and Threats. You really look at it and say, is this a threat to my company overall? If something goes wrong here, how big of an impact am I going to get?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
For me, when I'm doing the traveling, it's really how easy it is to get a backup from a remote location, like for instance a computer from an electronics store, to replace the computer that just died, as opposed to, is this thing going to take 4 or 5 weeks to ship to me?
Yeah, I mean, how I define risk is the chances of something going wrong multiplied by the consequences. So, I mean, that is that is risk. I mean, that's the math to me of risk. So if the consequences are very low and the chances are relatively high for it to fail, it's okay. Like when we do our test streams and everything else, it's very, very low. Like if we're doing something in after hours, chances of failure are high because we're doing it, but the consequences are low because we all just learned something out of it. In fact, it might even be positive. When I'm doing a stream for 6 million people watching, any chance gets multiplied by 6 million, and stock prices, and it could be $1 billion problem. So then at that point you have backups to the backups to the backups to the, it's not just a backup. You have multiple layers of backup that it can fall through, to get down to that. But everything, you should know how everything could be routed around. I mean, you may not have 2 of things, but like we have in 090's master control, we have patch panels, like dumb just patches between video. And we've got hundreds of them, going down the back of these patches. I can patch a show if I needed to. Like if I lost stuff like when if we lost a piece of hardware or a router, we could literally route it straight from the switcher to the by patching them. So that's that's our ultimate backup. The routers are the middle backup. Then we have 2 switchers, we have, those types of things, but you want to know how you're going to get around whatever the problem is. And then you want to practice it, as we keep on talking about. Next question.
Juan C. Robales in Mexico's back. At what point creating another system backup is counterproductive?
Go ahead, Leo.
So it's when you're trying to do things where you're doing load balancing. I've seen a lot of problems with this, where people will put in 2 pieces of equipment that act automatic failover, or that they're sitting there trying to share the resources across 2 things, and they can cause storms. I've had it done in networking. I've had it done in other areas, that you end up with things which supposedly increase the reliability and actually decrease the reliability because they're fighting each other. We have a problem quite often in the UK where they will give you a 4G backup for your internet. Your internet will dip for under a second. It will fly over to the 4G. The 4G will take 30 seconds to come up again. It will then go back again, and it will go round and round in this forever loop, when actually pulling out the 4G backup actually makes it more reliable.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to look at. There's definitely places where we've decided that we're going to have a SPOF, which is we are short for single point of failure, SPOFs. So we know where the SPOFs are, and we just make decisions that the fix for that will decrease the chances of success. And so, but those are conscious decisions generally. Next question.
Gerald Grieve from Richmond. What medium is the best for long-term archival storage?
Go ahead, Aaron.
Depends on what you're doing. Generally, cloud backups are very good for long-term stuff. But if you want a physical medium, then I would suggest LTO tape. Make 2 copies, send them to Iron Mountain in 2 different locations, and forget about them until you need them.
Go ahead, Charles.
I'm going to second everything that Aaron said. And actually, the LTO tapes, usually when we have to ship them, we'll put them on 2 different planes just to make sure that, it gets to where it needs to go. But Glacier is an option that I've been looking into more and more. So as long as you don't need it immediately, because it can be pretty slow, the cheaper the option that you choose for.
And what's the kind of turnaround for the cheaper version for Glacier?
It depends. They have
It's 12
tiers.
hours. Yeah.
Tiers,
12
so
hours,
it could go
yeah.
like it could be 1 hour to 12 hours.
Right.
That's like their window, and then it can go from like a day to like 2 or 3 days.
Right.
So but if it's long term, it's not bad.
Yeah. Go ahead. Next question.
Juan C. Robeles from Mexico. How do you determine the priority of multiple backup plans?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
I was going to say multiple backup plans. One thing is these things should be scheduled. You shouldn't really even have to think about them. They should be. So how do you determine that? Well, based upon availability, I assume, costs, and all the other things we've talked about. But in my mind, everything should be done automatically.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
In regular occurring data, you should really have up to 7 backups of the same files going. One is the daily type backup. The other one is more of a weekly backup. Then you have a monthly, then you have a 6-month and a 1-year backup. A lot of enterprise will do it that way, and even go farther than that, than 7. But for the most part, that's where you should really have all your data backing up.
As far as backup plans is a generalized thing, this is where hiring people with experience makes a difference because they know where it failed. It's really hard, again, when people don't have an experience failure to think about what could go wrong. Like, it's just really hard. And so you have to have somebody there that's seen it, that pulls something out or does something, that unwraps things, that is constantly, that things that you should know about or whatever. And so it's hard to train without really training it, experiencing it. So that's the hardest thing. And we see those when you look at Tony Mobley, conversations with Tony Mobley or the Belfast method or all those other things, those failures, everyone's, when they fail, when things aren't working, that team is learning. That's building up scar tissue. That is, unfortunately, it's a building up scar tissue where it's not life-threatening or career-threatening. It is just us. We obviously want to make it always work, but it's also something that you want a place where you can fail. And that's something that we're trying to keep creating is places where we can fail and learn. Piece of saying. We used to have a saying in my earlier life of, you can bleed in the barracks or bleed in the field. The blood is a lot easier to manage in the barracks. so anyway, so you want to find places that you can do that. Go ahead, Aaron.
The only thing I'd add is learn how to troubleshoot.
Yeah.
How to go back to first principles, learn where all the failure points are, and then, again, practice.
No, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead. Next question.
Douglas to Carmichael. Would SSDs be more resilient than spinning disks in a NAS?
Jeffrey?
So SSDs and flash memory is getting a lot better. There was a point in time where having SSDs was going to be more of a temporary solution, but things have gotten a lot better, especially with NVMe SSDs. If you're talking about an SSD on your desktop and it's not backed up in any type of RAID situation, then the NAS would probably be better as the spinning drive. But eventually, you might want to start thinking about getting flash memory set up into your system if you've got a lot of data and you need to access it really fast, because it's getting a lot better and a lot more resilient.
Go ahead, Charles.
The main thing that we've encountered is just cost. I mean, for like the gigs and terabytes you get in a spinning disk, an SSD, you need to know the situation that you want to use it for, because it is faster and it is more reliable, as stable, but it's going to cost you a lot more. So let's say, for example, on set, when it's a little chaos at times and things do get bumped around, it's all solid state.
Yeah.
Because we found a RAID with some spinning disk, you accidentally bump the table, and then all of a sudden you're starting to see errors in places. So in a situation like that, solid state at home where it's a controlled environment, you'd be okay with a NAS with some spinning disk.
Go ahead, next question.
Gerald Grieve of Richmond. Does anyone use ZFS?
Aaron?
Yes. Yeah, ZFS, for people that don't know, or ZFS, the Z file system, is it's actually what they call it, even though they were Americans who wrote it. But is a file system that was written by Sun Microsystems, is now owned by Oracle. But now there's an Open ZFS, which is even more confusing because anyway, whatever. OpenZFS is part of Linux now, as well as FreeBSD and other things. It is probably the best file system out there right now. It uses this layout that's pretty unique. It works really well. It lets you expand and contract file systems. It lets you do all sorts of stuff under the hood, deduplication, the whole 9 yards. So, yep, it's great.
Next question.
1C Rabeles in Mexico. Is it worth trying to make work a primary system when you've switched to a backup?
Go ahead, Aaron.
Only to the point that you can trust that the primary came back the way it should be and will stay there, which is usually no, but you never know.
We almost, in a show that we're doing, we don't, like once we switch over to the backup, we just stick with it. Because now we view it as like we're now flying with one engine. Let's just not try to turn the other engine on. If it's working, just, leave it where it's at. And again, I know that I have a bad habit of having analogies that are a little rough, but we call it leaving the knife in. Like it's just like knives. The person's not, the event's still working. Just don't pull it out. so next question.
1C Rabeles with Mexico's back with, what is the plan when everything else has failed?
Go ahead, Aaron. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Charles.
To carry on what Aaron just said, if you've applied all the ideas and concepts that we've been discussing right now, chances are you have a bigger issue like an asteroid or a solar flare that has wiped out everything. So you might have a societal issue at hand.
Right. Go ahead, Leo.
So these things happen. Life happens. Nobody dies. And you actually find that you learn from it. And invariably, when you put for things and you can get stuff back from where you believe you can get it back, it can take you longer to sit there and try and find the stuff than you actually need to do it. And sometimes you just have to say, I can't get it back. I have to move on.
Calmly start to document quickly. Like, you'll forget almost everything. So the big problem with events in general is that adrenaline is incredibly powerful, but it makes it really hard to retain your personal hard drive. So it'll put a bunch of stuff in, you'll be able to do a bunch of things, and then you'll forget everything. Like it just disappears. And so the thing that when things are coming apart, we immediately, like if for the handful of events, and I've literally I'm so paranoid that I've had very few events that just unwrapped completely. I mean, they've had things that aren't perfect, but maybe 20 out of 2,000 have really had a critical, devastating failure. And usually, but what we did immediately was meet right after the event. Like we just all get together, talk about what happened. Like, okay, what happened there and how did we do this and everything else. Then we also started building a system in which we do the RFI that sits inside of Room for Improvement, which is inside of Discord. We have RFIs during our show, and you'll see us all. We all have these little RFI files, and we're like typing what's not working. It's all we type. We don't type what's working. We don't care. We type what's not working during the show. And the reason you do that is because you log everything during the show while you're working, and then at the end, everybody puts their individual RFI files in, and that will, when you need to document it later, you don't try to think about how to fix it, and we also don't tell people to filter it. Like you get these things in people's RFI files, like the sandwiches were cold, like bad coffee, and they just get, they just put, we build a culture of complaining, into like live shows. I mean, we don't do it as much for post shows, but we do it for live shows. We build this culture of post shows are too long. It's too many complaints. So anyway, for the live shows, you're constantly putting these in and you see all kinds of weird stuff. But what's interesting is that if you need to de-exit later, these are like error logs, like you can't, you need those error logs to be generated in real time, and because then you can go back and go, oh, well, this person had this problem right here and this happened over here. And then you can start tying back together. Oh, that's what happened, and that's how that worked. Go ahead, Aaron.
You said something some people don't know. What is DX?
DX. I don't even know what that. I don't know if there's a
discuss. I think.
Discuss. Well, DX is we call DX is not discuss, but it to interrogate
Deconstruct.
something.
Yeah.
Deconstruct it. I don't know if it has an English nomenclature other than the two things you hear a lot on site is fax and DX, and their fax is probably more popular in broadcast, and DX is more popular in software and other things like that. But that just faxing out the lines means testing out all the lines, and DXing is usually something that's more of a going back and fixing something, figuring something out, as opposed to the faxing the system is something that you'll hear commonly to try to ringing out the system is another thing that you'll hear is just we need to ring out the system or fax it. Yeah. Did I let's see, Leo? Sorry, I lost where I was. I lost my place. Go ahead. Oh, can't hear you.
No, it's fine. Go,
Okay.
go.
Next question.
Guy Cochran from Seattle. Keenan is a master of disaster and sent an image to share. Can we analyze it if it's put up?
Sure. Guy. This guy there.
So here is the image, and here's what he wrote. It's a 55-inch tower trailer with Sierra wireless router on Verizon and AT&T FirstNet. Uses Ubiquiti Dream Machine Pro and 48-port switch. Also has 3 APs on the tower. This will be used for disasters. 50-amp power plug and dual fuel generator. Everything has a backup, plus radio repeater on board and 12 Motorola portables. So let's zoom
that's
in
some
just a
backup.
Yeah, he's not messing around. And I think this other image is the actual, that's a Dream Machine, and then that's a switch, and it looks like he's got the power backup.
Mm-hmm.
And then
The only thing I didn't see there is a outriggers, so the thing's going to tip over, and then it will be useless to everybody.
He may not have included that in the photo. For some reason, I think that Keenan would probably think of that. So I think that he'd probably have that there. But yeah,
does it have a spare tire?
By the way, when we talk about backups, UPSs and generators go well together because they, that you want to have that moment of battery. So we have like everything on UPS, and then we'll have a generator, and that means that if we have to switch over to it, now usually the generators we light up the generators for a show. And then it means that all we have to do is calmly go over and you hear everything beeping. You calmly go over and switch the power, and you want to make sure that how do you switch that power? When do you do it? And does everything, unplug it and see if everything's going to actually work. That gets back to what Aaron keeps on, nothing's as good until you actually test it. Next question.
Guy Corcoran in Seattle again is back with what is PACE, P-A-C-E?
Yeah, PACE, we talked about it a little bit, but PACE is a SEAL term for primary alternate contingency emergency. And so we have employed that for a lot. Some of us employ it a lot. So you think about, the idea is that you have to have all these, and you think about them, and you know what they're going to be, and you plan for them. It's really important. Next question.
And I think our final question is from Douglas Carmichael. What have your experiences been with non-union stagehand labor versus IATSE labor? Thank you.
I don't know if it's really a backup. I don't know if it's a backup thing. I will say that the one advantage from a backup perspective, as we talk about it, when you're working with the union and something isn't working, you need another person. It's much easier to find them. You talk to your steward and you say, I need another camera operator. I need another this, and they have a short list that lets you do that. So the challenge with it is that sometimes the IATSE labor is not as specialized as the folks that we need. So that sometimes is a challenge, and obviously there's some restrictions. And what I will say overall is, you're not a grown-up production company until you know how to use it. You work with a union crew, like you're not grown up. You do horrible things and you do weird things and you drive your teams into the ground and you do all this other stuff. And when you start doing I did lots and lots and lots. I've done lots and lots of union jobs, and those restrictions were put in place. The meal penalties and the overtime and everything else requires you to rethink how you do production until you get to a point where even our non-union jobs, they probably run a little looser than the union jobs, but they are still way better because of the union experience, that you learn how to kind of be managed, and process that. And then you talk to your clients. These are $1 billion clients. I mean, oftentimes $1 billion clients, and for me anyway. And I talk to them and go, it's going to be more expensive if you want to run all day. Like, it's just going to cost more. Like, if you don't want to take a break for lunch for a stream, everyone's going to get paid a little bit more. And there's nothing and I will say that I used to, when I first started, everyone, when they first start working with the union, complains about it, because they're just not used to it. They're just not used to this new way of doing it. Everyone complains about online events, like they just don't know how to work it. And then once you get used to it, it also, as a production company, it takes some of the pressure off, because all you can do is go, it's not like these are the rules. Like, these are the rules that we're in this facility, and we have the union rules are the union rules, and this is what we do, and we just have to manage that process. So it takes actually some pressure off of the internal person or internal company to not just go, you can't just say, oh, I'll just eat it, or my guys will just work harder, or no one will eat, or whatever, and it's not going to make any difference. And so I think that it's a growing thing, and you get to a certain size and you start doing lots of union jobs, and you get much more adulting, about how you do production. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I was just going to double down. My university happens to sit right outside the TMZ 30-mile zone. And the difference between so I get to see productions inside, the union productions inside, and I also get to see the independent productions outside. And the outside ones, they may do great work, and the footage may look just as good, but just the running of the productions just is not as smooth, not as professional, the whole operation.
Yeah. So it's that's our. I know it was a little out of the thing, but I think it's a good question. All right. It was good conversation. I didn't know how many people would want to talk about backups, but it was good. It was a great conversation. Like, a lot of these have kind of surprised me. They get into the second hour. I do take the second hour, by the way. The second hour, I'm constantly, like, every day I'm looking through that second hour suggestion. So just so you know, like, that is what I look through, and I look for votes. I look for what's there. Now, if I don't pick it immediately, it usually means that I just don't know who will, who will be in that second hour, or how do we get a hold of that second hour, or how does it fit into that? But I'm always looking through those, especially ones that are voted heavily, of figuring out how do they fit in. So definitely, as you look at that, this one was one of those ones that was like, hey, let's do that. And so definitely take that. That is a pretty serious place to ask questions in Discord. It's probably my schedule's often pretty busy. So the RFI, Mukana, and second hour are the thing I check every day. And I try to get to other things and look at them and everything else, but those are the three that I'm watching all the time, as we go through that. So definitely keep putting ideas, and it's a great idea. Put those ideas up there, and we'll find a place for them. All right. Now we're going to remember that tomorrow's a long day. We're back to the long day. We have education, making chai. I have to admit that I am very excited about the chai. I'm very excited about learning. I love chai, and I learned how to make it in Mumbai, and I just never really, it didn't sink in. Like, I learned it from a production person. I was having lunch at his house, and his wife showed me how she made it, and it was great. And I was excited, and I went home, and immediately wasn't what she had made. So I've been trying to get back to that for a long time, and I've just never really gotten it right. So we're excited about that at 10 o'clock tomorrow. And then at noon, we'll have, of course, the Belfast method, which is about to get a lot of attention. So it's worth seeing right now. The days that we'll remember about the Belfast method. All right. I'll talk to you soon, and see you in just a minute in After Hours.